shake. On game day, 12 man. Yeah, he's feeling it is vital. The Seahawks coming to take division titles.
This is the Seahawkers podcast, and this week we are doing a special tribute show to the late Paul Allen. Sad news as we got back from London. The Seahawks got the win, but unfortunately spoiled with some bad news about the death of the Seahawks owner, Paul Allen. And here to talk about it with me is Mark Tye Turner. He is the author of Notes from a 12th Man, a truly biased history of the Seattle Seahawks, as well as the Seattle Seahawks super season, Notes from a 12 on the best season in Seahawks history. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm sorry it couldn't happen on a better situation era and stuff because, yeah, as you mentioned, we lost the patriarch of the 12s, and it's a very sad time. You know, when he announced that, a couple of weeks ago, it was only a couple of weeks ago that they announced that his cancer had come back.
Right.
And we just knew at that point it was not a good thing. But
at the time, when I heard that, I kind of thought, oh, well, it's back. But you know what? He beat it once.
He fought it out in 2009.
Yeah.
And that was a scary time, I know, back then. And I guess that's the one thing we can take comfort in the fact is that he fought that battle back in 2009. And this is after he'd fought battles previously there. But he fought and won that battle in 2009. So he was able to live another 9 years, and he got to see his Seahawks win the Super Bowl. And so I think we all can take a little comfort in that. It's sad and what a loss for the Pacific Northwest and for technology and for the medical, advances and everything that he has done. Will always be there. That's what's going to define him. People are always going to remember him.
He's certainly leaving a legacy with the Seahawks. And a big part of his legacy is just the fact that, you referred to him as the patriarch of the 12s, but this team, it's not here without Paul Allen. You go back to the time, and we've talked to you many times, Mark, about Ken Behring and just how terrible of an owner he was for Seattle. The moving trucks were packed up, and this team was going to move to Anaheim. And
they actually did move to Anaheim.
Right.
They were down here for a couple of weeks. They had set up at a closed down, I think, elementary school down in Anaheim, and they set up Seahawk offices there, and you could call up and they said, "Good morning, this is the Anaheim Seahawks." And I just was in shock when I heard that, and I probably said something probably pretty awful on the phone to the poor receptionist before I hung up. But yeah, we were gone. The team was gone.
Yeah, and unfortunately you had groups like the Save Our Seahawks group that Mark Collins led up and organized and filed a class action lawsuit. And I feel like that kind of bought a little bit of time too for the city to try and organize and because they were really actively trying to find somebody to purchase the team that would keep them in Seattle. And although I don't think Ken was necessarily interested in selling at that point either, he really did want to move the team down to Southern California.
Oh, yeah. And, and you got to give credit on that respect to Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner.
Yeah.
Because he said the Browns and the Oilers, the Raiders and the Rams, they had all moved on his watch. And he was like, I'm not going to have this happen again. Not an area of the country where we really need a team. The Northwest has only one team. We need to keep the NFL up there. So he did that. But yeah, it was Mark Collins and Save Our Seahawks. And then they teamed up with Paul Allen. And that was big because you had the grassroots support with Mark and his group, and you had Paul, who had the deep pockets, of course.
And he didn't buy the team outright initially. What he did was he purchased an option for the team that gave him about 16 months to really decide on what was going to happen moving forward.
Right. He bought, like you say, bought some time with that there, and that was huge. And they were able to get that stadium referendum passed.
Right. Referendum 48. We'll always remember Referendum 48 because Super Bowl 48 was the first win. So some nice numerology there. But and that referendum too, it narrowly passed. There was not a ton of support because it was a statewide referendum. It wasn't just Seattle. So it was open to the entire state. And it won 51% to 49%.
Yeah, and if you go east of the mountains, it was dead in the water. It was losing in some parts like a 3-1 margin. But fortunately for us, most of the population in the state of Washington, 70-something%, is on the west side of the mountains. So it was where the people lived, and they're the ones that voted it in.
And it seems a little bit crazy right now, just, looking at the cost of CenturyLink Field, at the time Seahawks Stadium, it was less than $500 million. And it doesn't seem like you can build a stadium now for $1 billion.
And he really wanted to make that stadium experience really a memorable one. I believe he is the one that came up with the 12th man flag.
Yeah.
And it's a great new tradition that we've had since the stadium was built.
Number 12 was recognized, back in the 80s, retired, but it really turned into something different once Paul Allen took over the team. And I think that was an effort that they were trying to make that a bigger part of the experience. And I think you feel it too when that 12th man flag goes up every time. And I think there's no coincidence why every time that it was a championship game for the Seahawks at the stadium, that it was Paul Allen raising the 12th man flag in those championship games.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing with him, that how I really kind of identified with him in a lot of ways is unlike a lot of, some of the other owners, like the Mariners never had really strong local ownership there, and the owner for years was Mr. Nintendo, and he never even came to a game.
Right.
But Paul, on the other hand, here was a local guy, a little bit older than me, but we shared a lot of the same experiences there. We went to a lot of the same concerts. He used to go to Husky games growing up as a kid. So did I with his dad. And that was me. So Paul was a lot closer. I could identify with him. And that he was local, and he always stayed there. He had houses all over the world, which most, billionaires, or a lot of billionaires do. But his main house was in Mercer Island. He was a local. And I think his legacy it's going to be the team. It's going to be that stadium. I mean, there's things about that stadium that were totally his touches, like the way that they had the roof come over that, and they acoustically designed it, because he was a musician, and he always was fascinated with music and technology and stuff like that. They made it so that the sound would bounce off of the ceiling of the roof coming over, that would bounce it back right onto the field to make it that much louder.
Right. And having kind of the north end of the stadium open to kind of to give you that view into the city from that part of the stadium.
That was really cool. Unfortunately, they built those two apartment buildings right there, which kind of takes away some of the nice view.
It does, yeah.
But whatever. There, it's good. That sort of that's a very minor complaint. But I just think that's going to always be Paul's legacy as far as the Seahawks, and he's got a lot of different legacies. He got the Museum of Pop Culture. I mean, he's got
Oh yeah, the Trailblazers and his, all of his philanthropic work. And, to talk about some of the philanthropic work, I've been hearing interviews with some of the players, and, they've said where they've been with other teams and they don't feel like they necessarily have the freedom to go out and do things outside of just playing football. But it was because of Paul Allen and just kind of the culture that he cultivated within the team that he wanted his players to go out there and do something that was bigger than themselves. And that's why you had so many players that, big name players like Cliff Averill. He was saying that that was a big reason why he did some of the charities that he put together. It was because Paul Allen was so encouraging of it.
Yeah, and those are such good stories, and that's great. That a lot of players have that, and it's a testament to Paul and all the stuff that it's funny when we compare him. I've always said we had the greatest owner in sports. I always thought. I mean, he had the wherewithal to spend money on stuff where you needed to spend money. But on the other hand, he would always take a step back. He was the anti-grandstander. I mean, we would see him on the sidelines sometimes after games, and he went up to the trophy, thing, and he raised the 12th man flag. But that was about as visible as he was. You never heard him talking about the players in the league. He wasn't Jerry Jones.
Yeah, not Daniel Snyder.
Yeah, thankfully not Dan Snyder, where, he let the football people do their jobs. and I think that's the greatest thing an owner can do, is know what you can do to help the team. But on the other hand, know you're hiring all these good people there. Let them run the team. And Mike Holmgren really respected that and liked that. Pete Carroll does, and John Schneider, same way. You know, they don't get any. The only time they have any sort of, I believe, like, is when they would ask Paul a question. But he would never like go insert himself in the draft room, you know, in the war room there and say, oh, we need to get this guy. He just never did that. I don't think that was his style, which is huge. Because as we know, like, a bad owner is the worst thing. It's the biggest albatross any sports team can have, and consequently for any sports fan base, because you can't fire or trade an owner. That's another part of his legacy. This is a guy that he let everybody do their stuff. And that's what you really want in an owner. And after coming, you know, and after dealing with Ken Behring for so many years, being tormented by him, after we had great ownership with the Nordstrom family, who were complete non-meddlers themselves. Right.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you bring up the Nordstroms and talk about Paul Allen, because those are the two owners where the Seahawks, they got their best coaches. You know, we got Chuck Knox during the Nordstrom era, and then it took until Paul Allen took over the team to where the Seahawks finally got a head coach and general manager in Mike Holmgren. And then when he left, we had the 1 year of Jim Mora Jr. where it seemed like, oh, this is going in a bad direction. And they immediately got rid of him and brought in Pete Carroll.
Which, remember, at the time, I mean, that wasn't exactly the most popular decision either.
No, well, not among Huskies fans, for sure.
Yeah, well, and not just among, like, I just remember listening sometime and just reading online about, like, a lot of the responses from people that it wasn't like everybody going, yay, we got Pete Carroll. It was like, oh, what? This guy, he's bailing USC because they're getting busted now.
Right. And then Pete Carroll hadn't had the same kind of success in the NFL when he was with the Jets and the Patriots. And so I think for Seahawks fans to go from, you know, a Super Bowl winning coach when Mike Holmgren was with the Packers, and then we're thinking, well, why don't we do that again?
Yeah. So, and we've definitely lucked out in some ways, because we lucked out that we got Russell Wilson in the third round, 5 picks after the Jaguars took a punter.
Right.
So, you know, those sort of little things happen, and it's just, you can't expect those things to happen. So so we've been definitely fortunate in that respect, but we, you know, great coaching, and, you know, and Pete this year is going to have to do probably his greatest coaching job. So, you know, we'll see what the season has forward right now, but they are definitely looking better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Compared to the first 2 games, I'm almost a little bummed out that we have a bye week, because just the momentum seems to be pretty strong right now.
Yeah. But the good thing about winning, the one thing about it, because you have to have the bye week, and especially after the London game. But the good thing is that we get to kind of savor on a victory for 2 weeks, albeit it's very bittersweet now because of Paul's passing. So that's going to, you know, but I have a feeling like, I mean, because even when we come back, we're going to Detroit first. So they don't even play at home until November.
Yeah, when they play the Chargers.
So I'm curious. I'm sure they'll have a nice ceremony and everything. And I think there's definitely a spot for Paul on the Ring of Honor. I think when he probably didn't want to do it himself, I think, and I understand, because he doesn't have that ego. He doesn't, you know, he's, like we say, he's not a grandstander type, you know, he's very low key. He always has been. So, but I think they can do that now for him. You know, they did it for Pete Gross, like right before he died. And that was a little different, but that was, you know, Pete Gross really deserved it as well. So it would be nice to see Paul. And I think they're going to do it. I think sooner than later. I think it would be nice. I just think he would always be up there. And I always say, like, people, you know, parents can tell their kids when the kids are asking, who's that person up there? Who's Dave Brown? You know, who's Cortez Kennedy? These are people that are gone, but not forgotten.
Well, I want to read a few comments that came in from some of our listeners as well. Dave Bloomquist, he posted, just woke up to the Paul Allen news, really devastated. What he did for our franchise cannot be understated. Take another path and we could have easily been the LA whatevers, owned by the awful Ken Behring. No team, no clink, no Super Bowl trophy. You get the picture. All that and a kind, generous, brilliant, innovative man. What a loss.
Very succinctly, that spells it out right there. That's it.
Tom Cornell says his generosity to education meant I got to spend an amazing year at the University of Washington, where my love for the Seahawks begun. 15 years later, I got to watch them in my home city. Thanks, Paul. Manuel Mendhane says, when I saw the news on Twitter of his passing, I cried for what felt like 20 minutes. My girlfriend asked what was wrong, and I told her, you're going to think it's silly, before telling her about his death. That's how much the Seahawks mean to me, and I knew she really wouldn't understand. And one more here from Craig Humphrey says, without Paul Allen, we wouldn't have won the Super Bowl. He will always have a place in the hearts of all Hawks fans forevermore.
Yeah. And I shed tears too. I mean, it was very sad. I mean, even though we knew that day would probably be coming eventually, it doesn't take the sting out of it.
Yeah.
And in my first book, I have a whole chapter and it's called Thank You, Paul. And it's a big thank you. And I write about him, about saving the team and everything like that. And I remember at the end of the book, or at the end of the chapter, I talk about how I was fortunate enough to meet Pete Townsend of The Who twice. And The Who's my favorite rock band of all time. And I was able to thank him for his great music and stuff like that. I always said I'd love to thank Paul if I could in person. And I was fortunate enough to do that about 4 years ago when I was up at the opening of the Museum of Pop Culture's Seahawks exhibit. I don't know. Did you get to go see that?
Oh, yeah. When they had the trophy there and
Super
Bowl rings and Yeah,
and it was great. They had this nice little 10-minute film that I was fortunate enough to be a part of in that film. But I was also able to be introduced and shake Paul's hand and thank him personally for saving the team.
Oh, wow.
So, it's just cool. And I'm just glad I got to have that experience. So as we move forward here, we'll always be able to remember Paul, and he's going to have lots of, there's lots of monuments, so to speak, for him, about him, including the Clink. I would think it would be nice to just rename the stadium Paul Allen Stadium myself. Right. I think CenturyLink, I don't know how long they got their deal on. And it's funny because the name has kind of changed over time. It started out as Seahawks Stadium, and then it's gone to a few.
Then Quest, and then CenturyLink, yeah.
Yeah, I think Quest was bought by CenturyLink, so I think that's why the name changed.
Yeah, I don't have a problem changing the name of a stadium. I mean, let's get into some of the unanswered questions too, because, there's a lot of people wondering, what is going to happen? And there's so much that we really don't know. It wasn't made public of what his plans were to do with the team when he did pass it. It does sound like there was a plan in place, but even if there is a plan to for someone else to take it over, or for the team to be sold, or something else in place of whether it stays with this company as far as it's managed, things are going to change because Paul Allen did have such an influence on the organization. It would be impossible not to change with somebody else different at the top.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the details. And there's just mostly been speculation, and all I have is really speculation that the transfer, the ownership goes to his sister Jody, but I don't know for a fact. I think only if you're within the organization, you know exactly what's going on. But what I do probably know, I think that's gone on, is I think Paul has it set up in some sort of trust that the team can never move.
Yeah.
I'm sure he has that worked out somehow, that if the team is ever sold, it is never allowed to move, because I can't imagine him, after all he did for to save the team, that he would ever want this team to move. So there's ways they can do all that, with paper, you get legal documents that in trust and stuff like that. Maybe there's one last bombshell where he donated the team to the state of Washington, and everybody in the state of Washington now becomes an owner of the team.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of been my hope, just that the Seahawks now could somehow become the second publicly owned team along with the Packers. Right.
I mean, yeah, that's what I would like. I think it's probably pretty impractical at this point there. I mean, the Packers was only because of the system there when they first came in the league,
right?
Some 100 years ago, where they could do ownership like that. But I think it's just too hard now. But if there was a way of some sort of public trust set up or something, like, it would be cool. It'd be very cool, like, to have the team in some respect owned by the state of Washington or something like that. Like I said, I don't know. I don't think it's very practical, but it'd be nice. I mean, you and I would love it. Like it's like the Packers kind of a thing. So, but I have a feeling like it's not going to be a situation like, oh my God, he's gone. Somebody could swoop in and buy the team and then move the team. I just don't see that happening.
Well, and you brought up Tagliabue and, just how the commissioner does have to approve it. And I could not imagine with the sentiment toward the team right now that there would be any kind of interest among other NFL owners to move it anywhere else.
And also thing that is like, there is no longer this sort of like city out there that you can dangle your stadium over, because Los Angeles has its team now.
Right.
I really feel like they got it set up that they probably won't even sell the team. They'll stay within the trust or whatever there. And probably, hopefully in a lot of ways, it will be business as usual there, albeit without, the patriarch there.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's enough other people that can kind of help shepherd things through. That is my hope. And I just think that it's not like this was a sudden death. Like it just came out of the blue. Like I know he had it worked out. I just can't. He's way too smart of a guy to just say, "Oh, let's just go into probate court hell."
Right.
I don't see that ever happening.
With what the city went through when Behring was looking to move the team down to LA, I think a big part of that would have to be wanting to keep the team in place. And so, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a way that Paul Allen made that happen. A couple more comments here I wanted to read. Mike Pritchett, you mentioned you got to meet Paul Allen. Mike posted on his meeting with Mr. Allen. He says, I met Mr. Allen on November 7th, 2010. The Seahawks were hosting the Giants. I was a member of the Seattle Seahawks color guard. I interrupted a conversation between Mr. Allen and Mr. Mike Flood to say hi and goodbye to Mr. Flood. Mr. Allen wished me well, good luck, and stated he was proud of our service members and to be safe. And 10 days later, he left for Afghanistan. So Mike remembering a moment there. And Mark Burrell says, never met him, but it seemed the Seahawks and fans were his extended family in the way that he nurtured and interacted with the organization and all those involved. Such a humble man and so successful in a diverse range of worthy causes and efforts.
All your listeners, they're spot on their comments. Because that's really it there. It's kind of I get a little choked up still on this whole thing. It's like it's only been a couple of days to process all this, and basically we can just like I said, his epitaph is 4 words: he saved the Seahawks. Every 12 out there is forever indebted, and maybe we should actually make a little push to rename the stadium. I don't know how much longer the rights are, but I think it would be a nice thing. I
think we're just going to have to wait and see what comes out, because we don't know what has been set up, and maybe his sister decides that with what he's left behind, that would be a nice tribute to Paul. Would be to take over the naming rights after CenturyLinks had their time, and he's estimated to be the 44th wealthiest person in the world with $21.7 billion. So I think there's probably got to be something there to kind of leave behind and recognize his legacy, apart from his many organizations that he's founded. The Allen Institute for Brain Science, the Institute for Artificial Intelligence, the Institute for Cell Science. The Stratolaunch systems that he was working on, the giant aircraft. So there are plenty of things that he will leave behind, but I think something to commemorate his what he's meant to the Seahawks would also be important, I think, to fans, and just to recognize what he's done. Yeah, and I'm curious, how it will be presented there, because obviously they're going to do an alteration to their uniform or helmet. Will it use his initials? Will it use his name? Will it be his name inside a silhouette of a guitar, which I think would be very appropriate for him? And we have seen, on the Seahawks social media accounts, it's kind of the green ribbon with his initials. So I think that's probably something that we'll see there. That could be it there. Yeah, we'll see something, that's for sure, moving forward. So, and it is nice to turn on some of the national radio too and hear him recognized really throughout the NFL this week. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, and a lot of it, the sports, it was not just the NFL, but it was the NBA shows, because
kind of lost sometimes is the fact, he owned the Blazers. He actually owned the Blazers before he bought the Seahawks. So yeah, he was very much in the sports, owning two teams. I mean, that's huge. So that is another one of the great things of legacy here. It's like we had an owner. We're all blessed to have such a great owner, somebody that did so much for the community, and he'll be missed, but he'll never be forgotten.
Well, Mark, I think that's a good place to end it. Really want to thank you for joining us, sharing some of your thoughts, and of course,
my pleasure. I'm glad we got to do this here.
For people who haven't checked it out, can definitely, if you want to get into the history of the Seahawks, check out that Notes for a 12th Man book of yours, and then of course you relive the Super Bowl season with your other books. So two books to check out as a Seahawks fan.
And if you have my first book, go and grab it and just turn to page 104. In a way, it could hold up as my eulogy today.
Well, I think an appropriate way to close this out, too, would be to go back to CenturyLink Field at the conclusion of the Super Bowl 48 parade. They come into CenturyLink Field. Steve Rabel is up on the podium and introducing Paul Allen, where he gives his remarks after the Super Bowl victory.
And now it is my pleasure to introduce the man who built this building and the man who saved the Seahawks for the city of Seattle, the owner, Paul Allen.
Thanks, everybody. Wow, what an amazing parade that was. Everybody could feel the love, and I was told there were more than 1 million people out there on the streets. How amazing is that? 3 Sundays ago, many of you were here when we all heard the song New York, New York, and we knew we were going to the Super Bowl. That conference championship and all the other home wins this year were possible only because you are the best fans in the NFL. Now the world has heard from the loudest fans on the planet, and we know the 12th man is even capable of creating seismic events. The 12th man flag has been everywhere around the world, even to Everest and Kilimanjaro. Your outpouring of support throughout this past season has been something to behold, has reached beyond our city and state. In fact, all the way to New Jersey, where it impacted the very first snap of Super Bowl 48. And that support also unified and connected our entire community in an amazing way. For all of us, this Super Bowl win is the culmination of an exciting journey, and we wouldn't be here today if not for you, the 12th man. With that said, there's something special about a first, and I'm excited to celebrate the first ever Seahawks Super Bowl victory with all of you today. As an owner who was born and raised here, it's a very special moment and the fulfillment of a dream, not just for me, but for everyone on the team. Winning the Super Bowl is football's highest achievement, and I'm thrilled for the team, for Seattle, and for 12s everywhere. I want to thank an extraordinary group of people. Coach Pete Carroll, General Manager John Schneider, and all the players and coaches, and the entire Seahawks organization. They put all their heart, energy, and incredible focus into making today's celebration possible. look around at the 12-man flags flying today and savor a moment that Seahawks fans have been waiting for since 1976. I can't say how proud I am that the Seahawks are able to bring the Vince Lombardi Trophy home to Seattle. Thank you. Now we are all Super Bowl champions, each and every one of us. Thank you very much.